And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hi everyone in the aviation world. Here's your aviation forecast issued Thursday, April 3rd. I wanted to get started here with actually a surface map that I made yesterday showing this extensive weather system that's going to be affecting almost the entire state of Alaska. And in particular, this presents a number of challenges for the flying weather that we've got coming up. So notice that there's a storm center well south of Kodiak Island, but it's that trough that later on when I draw it, I think I'm going to draw it as a stationary front, is actually going to be forcing that warm, moist air up above a really cold layer and lots of low-level northerly winds. So with that being said, and all that precipitation moving into the Gulf of Alaska, we've got some real flying challenges today. So let's get started with tomorrow's flying weather. First of all, we got some IFR along the north slope, particularly the eastern side. It looks like some low clouds and fog is going to cause IFR conditions. And then with that stationary front that I was indicating there, all the way up through Norton Sound, IFR all across the eastern Bering Sea, some marginal VFR further to the west, but IFR up against the western part of the Alaska Range and into Prince William Sound, as well as parts of Kodiak Island. And then in the afternoon, that IFR actually moves just ever so slightly to the west. It's really a stationary front. And then that's all the way up to the north slope, also the eastern Bering Sea. Bristol Bay looks like it's going to filter out to about marginal VFR or so, but and parts of Kodiak Island, but most of the Gulf is IFR conditions. And then for Saturday morning, very similar pattern, except now we've got some IFR forming up in the western Bering and the at least south of the western Aleutians. But notice that IFR is all the way across the Alaska Peninsula down into Dutch Harbor area, Kodiak Island, and Prince William Sound. And now it's creeping into southeast Alaska as well, almost to Chilkoot and White Pass. And then for Saturday afternoon, lots of IFR, even across the eastern mountains, all across the Wrangell St. Elias, into Prince William Sound, Kennedy Entrance, IFR also in the eastern Bering Sea on up into the Bristol Bay area, into the Kuskokwim Bay area, and then we have some IFR with snow on up into Utiagavik and even parts of the Brooks Range. So lots of flying weather challenges coming up. So forecast conditions tomorrow: Anatovik marginal VFR, also Adigan marginal VFR, Lake Clark and Merrill IFR, and I really want to emphasize turbulence in that area, as you'll see in the turbulence forecast coming up. For Rainy Pass, IFR and turbulence. Windy Pass, IFR becoming marginal VFR, and I almost put the turbulence in there too, at least a light chop in Windy Pass. And then Isabel, VFR, Mentasta, VFR, Tahiti Pass, marginal VFR and plenty of turbulence. Turbulence and low-level wind shear in Portage Pass with IFR. Chilkoot and White Pass, they're VFR in the morning, and then we're going to start to see clouds moving in from the west, becoming marginal VFR, and turbulence will be just to the west of that area. And check the forecast tomorrow to see if that isn't moved a little bit further to the east. Okay, for our freezing levels, surface in the morning through Upper Cook Inlet across to portions of southeast Alaska. Notice how far the freezing level line has moved south in the Bering Sea. Unalaska Island will be just on the edge of it. And then we have some inversion conditions in the central interior, and then it ramps up to about 8,000 feet as you get out over the Gulf. So, for our icing on Friday, I have a couple of areas of isolated severe along that stationary front that I've been talking about. Flight level of 4,000 feet to 14,000 feet for some isolated severe plenty of considerable moderate all the way up to the North Slope, all the way down through the eastern portion of the Bering Sea, across Dutch Harbor, and then there's one area of isolated severe that's going to be off the Gulf of Alaska, but almost the entire Gulf of Alaska, considerable moderate, and that'll be the freezing level up to 120. So, looking at our jet stream, first of all, you can see a lot of energy on this map. What we've got is a northwesterly jet over the far western Aleutians and ramped up to 135 knots. In the meantime, there's a northerly jet across, a westerly jet across the North Slope. And in the meantime, the southerly jet is bringing all that moisture up from the south in the Gulf of Alaska up to 140 knots, and then a few places with the high level on up in the 60s. So that then for a 9,000 foot wind, you can see at that mid-level, there's a lot of wind speed concentrated out over the Gulf, but also through the western part of the Alaska Range, and then also on the Kenai Peninsula. So your mid-level winds about ramping up to about 55 knots, and then you can see those northerlies over the central Aleutians. So then for 3,000 feet, that's what's going to really stick a lot of our turbulence in the forecast. So we've got up to 65 knots southeasterlies through Prince William Sound, up to 50 knots going through Kennedy Entrance, going right across Lake Iliamna, and then we have a whole series of northerly low-level jet up to 65 knots going through the eastern Aleutians all the way down from about Cape Romanzoff or so. And then I also wanted to point out that we've got some polar easterlies setting up along the North Slope, about 30 knots or so. So for our turbulence, here's the big story. First of all, expecting low-level wind shear on a lot of the eastern side of this massive area of turbulence I've got in the forecast now. Considerable moderate out on the western side of the Panhandle, all the way up through Yakutat over to Prince William Sound. I've got one area of isolated severe from Kennedy Entrance across Lake Iliamna. That'll be surfaced to about 10,000 feet. And then we've got another one way out in the Gulf. But considerable moderate for a lot of southwestern Alaska as well, and then isolated moderate for the large swath of the eastern Bering Sea into the Aleutians. We also have plenty of turbulence over Unalaska Island and into the central Aleutians as far as considerable moderate, looking for surface of 3,000 to maybe up to 4,000 feet. All circulating around that storm center that's well south of Kodiak Island. So that's our weather. Lots of challenges tomorrow. Please file a flight plan and fly very, very safe out there in this considerably challenging weather. Thank you.